Those bursts of rain could be on the heavy side. To start the day on Monday, the best of the brightness in the southeast here is likely to give way to increasing cloud as we go through the day. Those outbreaks of rain moving in from the southwest, pushing northeastwards across many parts of the UK. So some early brightness, say, towards the north and east, soon fading. Skies will brighten behind the rain band across the south and west of the UK, certainly heading into the afternoon. But that could well spark off 1 or 2 heavy showers too across these southern and western spots, even 1 or 2 thundery showers in places. In the sunshine, temperatures not doing too badly. In the mid, locally high teens Celsius, peaking around about 17 or 18 Celsius, but cooler under that showery rain. Into the evening, the rain continues its journey northeastward into Scotland. Clearer skies developing towards the south and west. As we head through the rest of the week, there's a case of sunshine and showers still. Some more persistent rain across the south of the UK for a time Tuesday night into Wednesday, and perhaps things turning a bit more settled generally later in the week.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Courtesy of Marquis Leisure, you could be driving away with this brand new Elnag Baron 560 motorhome. It comfortably sleeps 4, comes with sky roof, integrated kitchen and bathroom, and is worth over £67,000. And that's not all, as we'll also give you a further £5,000 in tax-free cash to make sure that wherever this motorhome takes you, it takes you there in style. For another chance to win the lot, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB13 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 6th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new Royal Newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes and Co weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Very good evening and a very happy Easter wherever you are watching or listening. Let's get you up to date tonight at 6. The US says it's pushing for a full and comprehensive ceasefire in Ukraine as Russia's one-day Easter truce is set to expire in just under 4 hours' time. The Kremlin's announced no plans to extend it after both sides blamed each other for breaking the 30-hour pause in fighting just hours after it began. President Zelensky says Russia never stopped its assault operations and there's been no let-up in artillery fire. He's also accused Moscow of trying to create a false illusion of peace. But the Kremlin claims Ukraine violated the truce more than 1,000 times. Meanwhile, RAF Typhoons have been roaring into action over the Baltic, intercepting 2 Russian aircraft in back-to-back missions from a base in Poland. It's the first scramble since British jets were deployed under the Operation Chessman, as tensions mount near NATO airspace. The interceptions highlight growing fears over Russian aggression and the UK's vow to defend NATO's eastern flank. This time, Britain's flying alongside new ally Sweden, with more joint patrols expected. Last year alone, RAF crews carried out 50 similar intercepts. Also tonight, Israel's military has admitted it mistakenly killed 14 medics and a UN worker in Gaza, blaming what it calls an operational misunderstanding. An internal probe reveals the convoy was clearly marked with emergency lights, but troops opened fire thinking they faced an imminent threat. Video found on a medic's phone captured his final prayers before gunfire erupted. The Red Cross says it's outraged, and Israel has dismissed a top officer over claims that some victims were Hamas members without providing proof. It's now the latest deadly error in what the IDF is calling a chaotic combat zone. Ed Miliband says the government will double down on net zero, accusing opponents of nonsense and lies. He says the shift to clean energy is vital for jobs, social security, justice and national security, especially after soaring gas prices following Russia's invasion. Unions, though, and political rivals warn the plans could put thousands of jobs at risk. Among them, Nigel Farage, who calls the policy net zero lunacy. But Ed Miliband insists green power will create good jobs and protect working families from future energy shocks. Police are investigating after 7 statues in Parliament Square were defaced during a trans rights protest in London. Graffiti was sprayed across the memorials as thousands gathered after a Supreme Court ruling on the legal definition of a woman. Specialist teams will be brought in now to clean the monuments, and the Met Police says it's also reviewing footage of the incident. And a dad from Southampton has gone viral for cracking into luxury Easter eggs. Billy D'Souza's TikTok reviews show him smashing open eggs worth up to £225. He's spent more than £500 so far, but says it's not about showing off, it's about helping people spend smarter, with the leftovers given to schools and families in need. And with some eggs rising more than 125% in recent years, he says it's now more important than ever to know where your money is really going. Those are the latest headlines for now. A full roundup in the next hour. Now, though, it's over to Camilla.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good morning and welcome to this Easter special edition of the Camilla Tominey Show on GB News. While the country tucks into hot cross buns and chocolate eggs, we're bringing you all the latest on politics, current affairs and culture with a seasonal twist. Throughout the show, I'll be joined by my panel to reflect on Easter messages from our leaders, and we'll bring you the very latest from Windsor Castle, where the royal family are stepping out for their traditional Easter Sunday service. Elsewhere, Britain's highest court, the Supreme Court, has now ruled unanimously that the word woman means what most of us have always understood it to mean, to be perfectly honest, a biological woman. We'll be speaking to Susan Smith from For Women Scotland, the organisation behind this historic win, to unpack the implications for the future of women's rights across the UK. We'll also hear from reformed young offender and motivational speaker Ads Khan on the pressures facing the prison system and what needs to change. Plus, stateside, the drama never stops. Dr. James D. Boys will join me with the latest on Donald Trump. We've got 90 minutes of news and views this Easter Sunday. Do not even think of going anywhere. Welcome back. Joining me now for our Easter panel are royal commentator and historian Rafe Hadel-Mancu and former Lib Dem Minister Norman Baker. Lovely to see you both this morning. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter.
Happy Easter. Have we consumed any eggs yet?
No, not yet.
No,
Too early.
Still time. Whole day to go. So let's talk about Easter in the context of whether we are still a Christian country. Rafe, lots of
commentary, and I'm going to give a few examples in a minute, about kind of the erasure of Christianity from Easter messaging and this idea that we are sliding into secularism. What do you think?
I think it's deeply worrying, and it must be opposed. Look, we need to understand that Britain still is legally a Christian country. We have an established Church of England and we have an established Church of Scotland. Now, what does established mean? Because quite often you hear people say established. Established means the state church. It is Christianity is the national religion of this country. Therefore, it must be celebrated on its high days and holy days, and it must be celebrated in precedence to other religions. Now, that's not a slight against the other great religions of this world, but this is a Christian country. If you go to Saudi Arabia, you expect Islam to take preeminence and priority there. And you don't even need to be a Christian or a person of faith to understand the importance of Christianity. It's a building block. It's the keystone, I would say, of Western civilization. So many of our laws, of our philosophies, of our institutions are born out of Christianity. It gave birth to Western civilization. Western civilization created the modern world as we know it. So everyone owes Christianity a great debt. In fact, even the nuclear family, people watching at home on television, 2 parents and kids, that was born out of the Catholic Church's ban on cousin marriage between certain degrees of consanguinity, and even the notion of individualism was born out of Christianity, particularly out of Protestantism. The most individualistic nations in the world are all Protestant nations, and individualism doesn't exist in the non-Christian world, at least not until industrialization came around.
Let's bring Norman in. I'm going to give an example of perhaps the removal of Christianity from a kind of Easter celebration. English Heritage came out with a leaflet for a children's adventure quest, and it had no mention of Christianity or Christ in it at all, and suggested that Easter wasn't originally Christian and was actually a celebration of spring, describing it as originally a pagan festival. What's all that about?
Well, I mean, to some extent, there's some validity in that historically, that there was a conjunction of what's a very important part of the Christian calendar, of course, Easter, with what was happening pre-Christian days. And there was a goddess called Istra, which is where the Easter comes from that.
No mention of Christ or Christianity in a leaflet about Easter.
Well, I mean, I don't agree with that. But, I mean, historically, we get Easter eggs and Easter bunnies tend to come from the pagan element of pre-Christianity.
We're just taking in some live scenes from the Vatican, by the way, as you speak. Norman, carry on.
So, well, I'm not sure I can compete with the Pope and the Vatican.
No one here can.
But, no, I mean, I think, so we have to recognise that interesting conjunction of pre-pagan or pre-Christian elements and Christianity came together. And we have both, essentially. Easter eggs are not a Christian thing, but they're a very important part of Easter. But clearly for Christians and for people in the country of any faith, actually, Easter is a very important religious festival. And my experiences with talking to people of other faiths is they're perfectly happy with recognising the importance of Christianity in Christmas and in Easter. And there's a reason why they shouldn't do. And I've got Muslim friends who are very happy to recognise that.
I know, but if you kind of try to remove Islam from Ramadan, you'd be absolutely castigated.
Well, yes, that's wrong.
The other thing is we've had Christmas described as Winterfest and things, Rafe.
Exactly. We shouldn't be ashamed to celebrate Easter for what it is. It's the oldest and the most important part of the Christian faith. The resurrection we celebrate today on Easter Sunday when Christ ascended. And without the resurrection, Christianity wouldn't exist. You know, St. Paul said, without the resurrection, our preaching would have been in vain. And, you know, resurrection is all about things that we can all celebrate in. You know, it's about sacrifice, it's about redemption, it's about the atonement of sin. Those are key messages of Easter, but that's the central building block of the Easter message. You know, that our Lord sent down his only Son to die for the atonement of our sins. You know, but by atoning for our sins, Christians believe that they will have life everlasting. Now, that is still the official policy of the Church of England and of Scotland. It should be celebrated, and the Easter message is supposed to be celebrated by Christians in their everyday. When you're struggling through life, you think of Christ struggling on the cross. You think of Christ's human sacrifices when you're trying to be a better person in the world.
Norman, isn't it kind of a liberal invention, this idea that individualism creeps in, the family is denigrated? We're also throwing into the mix now social media, this degree of kind of narcissism that appears to have crept in, particularly when it comes to younger generations. And then that leads to a degree perhaps of kind of godlessness. No, whoever your God is, this secularisation of society maybe Lib Dems are quite happy with it.
Well, I'm not sure that secularisation is a problem per se. What's the problem is the narcissism you refer to, the individualism at the expense of looking after society and feeling a part of it. I think that's a very dangerous trend that, frankly, isn't helped by people like Donald Trump in the States, who clearly are very narcissistic in their approach to life.
Well, there are many divisive narcissistic figures on both right and left.
There are, and exactly, there are. And extremes, of course, I don't think are very helpful to society generally. I think where you want to be is looking for commonality, looking for societal values, looking after each other, looking after your friends and your family. That's where I think we should be getting to. I think we're getting further away from that. Just on the Saudi Arabia point or the Islamic point, I mean, I was in Saudi Arabia some years ago, and I did make the point actually to the people I met there that I mean, they're very welcome to have their religion, and there's a lot to be said for Islam actually, which is not necessarily reflected in how Muslims always behave, but Islam itself is justifiable, I think. But I mean, why don't they allow other people to have their own religions if they've got different beliefs? They ought to do that. We do in this country. We recognise that people have got a right to their own religion. Why don't other countries do that as well?
Well, other countries have had a history of persecuting Christians, and I mean in very, very recent times.
Well, Christians are still the most persecuted minority in the world, you know, and I've been to Egypt during Ramadan, and I had to eat behind sheets in the shop windows so that nobody would see me eating food. We do have a pluralistic society, and yes, most of this country actually is secular and is atheist, but as long as we still have an established church and we have a supreme governor of the Church of England in the form of our sovereign, we are a Christian nation, and we should be unashamed to celebrate the Christian message of Easter.
Do you know what? I've just seen a stat in front of me that I wrote down this morning, which is quite surprising and slightly counterintuitive to what I've just said. Church attendance among Generation Zs or Zs, according to the Bible Society, is up 12%.
Yeah.
Hold that thought, because you're coming back later when we're going to get live footage from Windsor Castle with the royals arriving for their own Easter Sunday service. So just hold that thought for a moment, Rafe and Norman. Coming up next, we're going to be doing that, but I'm also going to be speaking to one of the women who took the Scottish Government to the Supreme Court. Susan Smith, the director of For Women Scotland, will be here to talk about that landmark ruling and what it means for women. And I'll be speaking to prison campaigner Ads Khan. All of that still to come, including the royals at Windsor. Stay tuned.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
4.2 million people in this country are living in hygiene poverty. That means they are having to daily make a choice between putting food on the table for themselves and their family, paying the rent, paying their bills, and buying the basic everyday essentials we all rely on.
And there must be such a stigma attached to, well, there is, we know that, to hygiene as well, because this isn't talked about. I mean, we're talking here this morning, 1 in 12 British people have to make a decision between eating and washing, but we never hear about that, do we? It's not spoken about.
You're absolutely right. We have, scarily normalised the conversation about food poverty and fuel poverty in this country. And what my charity, the Hygiene Bank, wants to do is to take one step on that road to ending hygiene poverty by abolishing VAT on soap, treating it as the basic staple that we all need every day. It's the first line of defence against illness and disease. Helps to keep us all safe.
And it's a confidence thing as well, isn't it? If people are really struggling, that can affect your confidence and mental health and all the rest of it. But if you also know there's even the slight possibility of not smelling fresh, for example, but I mean that can totally destroy you in a workplace.
Completely, and we hear every day about children who are bullied in school or who are not going to school because their uniform isn't clean or they feel stinky. They're being bullied by their peers. We know that 13% of people living in hygiene poverty have avoided work for exactly that reason. 9% of people have avoided going to a job interview, and that's so wrong because it is trapping you in your difficulties. Hygiene poverty is limiting life chances, it's blocking opportunities, it's stopping people find a way out of the hard times they find themselves in. And the thing that I always remind myself is that we're all actually only one step away from this.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point.
He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Lots more coming up. Prison rehabilitation expert and motivational speaker Ads Khan will join me to reflect on the current state of the prison system. We'll also discuss the traditional Royal Easter service, which is set to get underway shortly. Plus, Dr. James D. Boys will bring us an update on the latest from US politics. But first, joining me now is Susan Smith, the director of For Women Scotland, the group behind that historic court ruling at the Supreme Court this week. Susan, thanks so much for joining me, not least on Easter Sunday after what I know has been an extremely busy week for you and fellow campaigners. Now, we know what the verdict said. It said that trans women are not women and that biological women are women, and it shouldn't be said otherwise. However, now the interpretation is leading to some disagreements. We've got Baroness Faulkner, the head of the Equalities and Human Rights Commission, saying that that does provide an obligation for organisations to provide single-sex spaces. But then we've got Lord Sumption, who is quite the authority on the law, saying, no, actually it doesn't. It's been over-interpreted. What's your interpretation, Susan?
We think what it means is that anything that is advertised as a space or a service or a facility for women, it has to mean that it's biological women, otherwise it becomes a mixed-sex space. So obviously it doesn't stop people providing mixed-sex facilities, but I think that it would be very difficult to argue in practice that you're going to do away with women's spaces, because of course there are some women who would then be unable to participate in public life and they would be able to sue for discrimination based on the Equality Act. So I don't think that in practice they will be able to get, I know there's been a concern they'd get rid of women's spaces, but I don't think that could happen in practice.
I mean, I think lots of people are saying, well, because of this ruling now, we need sports bodies to say biological women are women, biological men, even if they identify as women, are not women. Therefore, we shouldn't have trans women in sport and other arenas. Do you agree with that? I mean, that was presumably the point of you taking this to court in the first place, but you're obviously going to get opposition to that. And I'll come on to somebody with a counter view in just a moment. But Susan, on that issue, is that how widely we are interpreting what happened at the Supreme Court this week?
Absolutely. And, you know, sport was one of those areas that was covered by exceptions anyway. So it was always within the power of sporting bodies to ensure that they were kept female only. They made a choice not to. And that was part of the reason we had to get clarity about what the law said, because without it, people were getting into very convoluted legal arguments and trying to be terribly clever and as an excuse as to why they couldn't do this. But I think the good thing is that now we know the law is on the side of the women who want that space, and it will be very hard, I think, especially in sport, for them to justify opening it up to anybody, because in sport we know there is a huge physical advantage conferred by biology. That does not go away, and it's been insane that we've had to have these arguments for so long.
We're going to get on to the NHS and its lack of response to this ruling, and also actually Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, still hasn't said anything about what was decided by the Supreme Court. Before we do that, let's just listen to the sort of counter-narrative to yours. We spoke, I think Bev and Andrew actually interviewed inclusive culture expert Joanne Lockwood on this subject, and she raised the point about how she felt that this could be detrimental to the trans community. Let's just have a quick listen to that, Susan.
My worry is this will weaponise discrimination against people who are trans, and will experience further discrimination, further marginalisation, further violence, and further loss of access to living our lives freely. That's what we're worried about. That's what I'm worried about. And hopefully the government the HRC will provide clarity and guidance to service providers.
Does Joanne Lockwood have a point there, Susan?
Not really. I mean, we've got the clarity that was the Supreme Court ruling, was giving us that clarity. And, you know, people like Joanne have really pushed and pushed and pushed. And they have tried to trespass across women's boundaries for a long time. Women were quite, I think women had been accommodating for a very long time. They hadn't raised too many objections. And it was only when people really started to make our lives intolerable that we started to have to fight back. And I don't think, look, no one's in any doubt what sex Joanne Lockwood is. It's perfectly apparent when you watch that. I don't understand why that is someone who would be at risk in a men's space. And if they are at risk in a men's space, that's something that men have to start to deal with, because it shouldn't be up to women to protect men who might be vulnerable. There are plenty of men who are vulnerable for all sorts of reasons, not all of them people who identify as being trans. And we're not human shields for them. And when they talk about not being able to live their lives, they have had no sympathy for the very many women who have not been able to live their lives. They have not been able to go shopping because they can't use a mixed sex changing room. And that's especially the case perhaps for ethnic and minority religious women. They've not had any sympathy for women who've been frightened to use a rape crisis shelter because it was headed up by a biological man. They've had no sympathy for these women who've been pushed right to the fringes because of their activism. And now they're trying to pull sob stories and try to play on women's kindness. Well, we were kind for a very long time, and it got us into this mess.
It should also be pointed out that, of course, having gender reassignment surgery and identifying as trans is a protected characteristic under the original Equalities Act. Moving on, are you surprised to have not heard anything from Prime Minister Keir Starmer about this ruling?
I think a lot of politicians owe women an apology, and I think Keir Starmer is one of them. I mean, he did make some ridiculous comments about something like 1% of women who have penises.
Yes.
And I know that the Labour Party have stepped back a bit in recent times, and Keir Starmer has been conspicuously silent on it. I think a lot of politicians are afraid of some of the sorts of men that we saw out demonstrating yesterday. I think they're frightened of them, and they should be frightened of them, because a lot of them are dangerous people. I'm terrified of them. But, you know, if mothers and grandmothers and young women, we've got an enormous amount of young women starting now to speak up at universities, and these are people who are actually at risk. He's the most powerful person in the country. He needs to stop being afraid of them and start to stand up for the people who need protection.
I've just grabbed a Mail on Sunday because the front page story makes for quite interesting reading. Ministers in WhatsApp plot to defy trans ruling. This is a story about ministers like the Culture Secretary, Chris Bryant, Dame Angela Eagle, having a conversation about how they felt that Baroness Faulkner's interpretation of the ruling was, quotes, appalling, and that they need to address this with a meeting next week. It seems that some public bodies are overreacting. What's your reaction to that, Susan? Because the counter-narrative is that actually public bodies aren't reacting quickly enough, that HR advice that was never steeped in law properly needs to be torn up, that institutions need to take a different approach, etc., etc.
Yes, I mean, we have, I keep saying this, but we had already won one judicial review before we brought this one. And our last judicial review put beyond all doubt that self-identification was not lawful. And the EHRC had confirmed that. Now, obviously, there was an issue with their previous statutory guidance, which this new guidance, even ahead of the ruling, was looking to address. But it reflected that self-identification was not the basis to allow people into changing rooms at work, for example. And yet, organisations have continued with those sorts of policies. And we saw how damaging those sorts of policies were in the Sandy Peggy tribunal, and we're seeing it for the Darlington nurses. There was never any question that either of the two individuals involved in those cases should have been in the women's changing rooms, because they didn't have GRCs as far as we're aware. So even before this ruling put everything beyond all possible doubt, those organisations were acting unlawfully. And the idea that this is an overreaction is ridiculous. It was the law. It was always the law. We've got clarity on the law. What has happened, as I said, there were organisations badly advising governments, NHS, other businesses, and the pendulum had swung so far the other way. So saying it's an overreaction, it's not. It's just bringing the situation back to normal, I think.
Susan Smith, thank you so much for your time this morning. Great to speak to you.
Thank you.
Still to come on today's show, prison rehabilitation expert and motivational speaker Ads Khan is here, and he's got a few things to say about the current state of the prison system. Don't go anywhere. This is the Camilla Tominey Show, only on GB News.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new royal newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point.
He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. We're going to be taking in those scenes of the royals arriving at Windsor in just a moment. But joining me first is Ads Khan, prison rehabilitation expert and motivational speaker. Ads, lovely to see you this morning. Thank you so much for your time. Tell us, first of all, I know you spent some time behind bars and revolutionised your life actually having served time in prison, got some qualifications, got a number of different diplomas, used a bad situation, made it better. But tell us, first of all, what is it like inside prison in reality?
In reality, well, very good morning. Thank you very much, Camilla, for having me on today. Well, the reality of prison life is it's a very dangerous environment to be in. As we know with the recent events that have currently unfolded, and my heart goes out to all the prison officers and the service people that are actually involved and are affected by what's actually happened. But this is the reality of an overstretched position that we find ourselves in. There's pressure on prisons, and it's not just we're not just overcrowded, we're overstretched. There's pressure on people, there's pressure on the governors, there's pressure on the prison service, there's pressure on resources, there's pressure on the actual teachers that actually try transforming these guys' lives. And there's a pressure on the educational system, and there's no space for basically progress due to all the constraints we have.
So that's obviously problematic from a rehabilitative point of view. If people can't better themselves in prison and then try and leave a life of crime behind and get jobs, that's problematic. Can we deal with this issue? And it's been much reported on this week. You've mentioned the incident at HMP Franklin there involving the brother of the Manchester Arena bomber. Islamic radicalisation in prisons. You know, just 9 days before this incident happened with these prison officers being brutally assaulted, there was reports coming out of that prison that it was no longer really possible to segregate the Islamic extremists in the prison's midst because they had taken over the prison. I mean, there was no need for segregation. The whole population appears to have been converted in some way. What's your experience of this issue when you've done your work behind bars?
What happened in Franklin was absolutely horrific, and I'm not going to sit here and try justifying that position in any way, shape or form. I do believe in reform, I do believe in rehabilitation, but at the same time, I am also a realist too. But one act of violence from a terrorist shouldn't define thousands of people trying to change their lives. You know, some people do twist faith for power. And stop, but we need to stop painting everybody with the same brush. You know, not every person with a beard and a prayer mat is running the wing, so to speak.
But there has been incidents where some people who are Islamic extremists have taken over, have converted other prisoners to the faith. So that's proving to be a problem for some prison officers to get a grip of. I mean, we had a story today in The Sun on Sunday suggesting that Islamist terrorists were exempt from sniffer dog jail searches because they were claiming it infringed their religion. We've got to have sniffer dog searches in jails, regardless of who your God is, surely, Ads.
I suppose if you're in the position of being in prison, committed crimes, then obviously that you've got to be subject to the security measures that are actually in place to make everybody safe. So again, you know, I'm not going to be defending that either. You know, I'm a Muslim, and I wouldn't find it difficult if a dog come to search my prison cell, for instance, because of the situation that I've put myself in the first place. You know, it comes with the territory. You know, you commit crime, you're going to go to prison. My aim and goal is to actually motivate people, put them on the positive path, get them to see that they can actually change. And you can change if you want to change, and change can occur in an instant if you're willing to flick the switch. But at the same time, if you find yourself in prison, then obviously, you know, you've got to adhere to the security measures to make sure everybody's safe, and that includes the prison officers and the education department and your peers that are actually around you.
When you spoke at the beginning, you were talking about a lack of resources. We know since the Grayling reforms that a lot of older, more experienced prison officers sort of took retirement early. That's left the staff much younger, much less experienced. We've even seen some stories in the press ads about some female prison officers having affairs with some of the inmates. It gives the public the impression that it's the inmates running the prisons rather than the officers. Is that accurate or rather hysterical?
Do you know what? It's unfortunate because you've got undertrained people with little experience. You know, when I was in prison, you know, there was people from the military background, there was people from the PE background. I'm still in contact with the prison officers that have supported my rehabilitation, even up to this day now that they've retired. And, you know, if you're going to be, we've got a system where we've got people that are understaffed, right? They're undertrained, and, you know, you're in prison. And unfortunately, this is some of the things that you get spillage because of no funding, because of no rehabilitation, because of having people in from the age of 18, you know, telling big grown inmates to follow instructions. And due to that, there are going to be problems. And this is what we're seeing because of the lack in funding and the resources that the prison's got. And this isn't, I'm not blaming the prison for this. This is a massive government problem that's been going on for decades, and people have been screaming and shouting about it for decades. It's like, you know, you're on a ship and you're heading towards an iceberg, for instance, and we can all see it's getting closer and closer, and nobody's turning the ship.
What are you saying then, Ads, that you think we need more prison places but also more staff? Or would you prefer to see some people out of prison? Do you think that some people who are serving for more petty crimes shouldn't be there in the first place? Maybe they should be given community service orders or other alternative punishments?
I believe in reform, and I believe in rehabilitation, and I believe in equipping people and having the resources to rehabilitate people. You can't rehabilitate people through iron doors. If somebody goes into prison as a drug addict and he walks out of prison as a drug addict, what chance has this person got to reform and rehabilitate himself?
Mm. But then equally, there isn't the resources to put into education. I mean, another problem with the prison population is the high levels of illiteracy. How do you get people off a criminal pathway into work if they haven't got basic reading and writing skills?
I think it's like a house. You know, if the foundation's strong, you can build on the house, but if the foundation's weak and you got to build on it, the house will fall. And this is something that I actually talk about, and, you know, the power of education. I never used to go to school sports days because I was rubbish at sport and fitness, but it was only when I went to prison, you know, I thought education didn't work for me the first time round. But it's not, did education work for me? It's, did I work for my education? Because once I did work for my education in prison, it did change my life. And, you know, it's, and now I help, you know, do my best to change other people's life and make sure that they understand that if I can change, then you can change, and people can change. But again, we need the resources available. We need people properly trained. We need staff properly trained. And it's like a business. If you keep taking money out of the business, sooner or later that business is going to go bankrupt. And that's exactly what's happening currently with the prison system. We need further reinvestment in people to give them the support and to give them to make sure that there's not going to be another victim once they get out of prison.
Ads Khan, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning. Have a happy Easter.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there, welcome to your latest holiday sun forecast. The unsettled conditions generally continuing for parts of Iberia and Italy over the coming days. But for the Canaries, apart from a few showers across the northern parts of the island, it should be fairly fine here. But back up into Iberia, France and Italy, some further showers. Some of these showers will be heavy, potentially persistent in places. But for a lot of Greece, Cyprus and Turkey, continuing fine and dry here, with temperatures for most here around the low 20s.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. During the week ahead, we'll see a mixed bag of weather. Most places seeing some warm sunshine, some showery rain too though, and things starting to quieten down later on in the week. Low pressure sitting towards the south and west of the UK at the moment. That's starting to feed some showers in across southern and western parts of the UK. And certainly as we head into the evening, we'll see further showers across the south and southeast of England. They'll ease overnight though, leaving some mist and fog patches here as we go into the early hours of Monday. Whereas out towards the west, the showers across Northern Ireland will start to make inroads across other western parts of the UK, starting to turn heavier and more widespread here as we head into the early hours. Clearer skies are likely up towards the northeast. Here we could see a patchy frost, but elsewhere it's a pretty mild night to come. So we start Monday then with some brightness up towards the north and northeast of Scotland. It's mostly fine here at this stage of the day. Whereas towards the southwest of the country, a few showers are likely. As we head into Northern Ireland, the showers will be emerging to give some more persistent spells of rain and some quite persistent outbreaks moving their way in across the Irish Sea into parts of Wales and the southwest of England too. Whereas towards the southeast of England, again, it's mostly fine here to start the day on Monday with a few bright spells in places. As we go through the rest of Easter Monday, that band of rain will progress eastwards and northeastwards across the UK, so most places will start to see some outbreaks of rain as we go through the day. Notice towards the south and west, those skies do start to brighten, but that will also allow some showers to break out. Some of those could well turn heavy, even thundery in nature in places. So it's the southwest seeing the best of the brightness later on in the afternoon. Temperatures not doing too badly, up to 16 or 17 Celsius in some of the sunny spells. And as we head into Tuesday, rain is more confined towards the northeast of the UK. Elsewhere, plenty of sunshine, just 1 or 2 showers around. But then notice later in the day, further rain starts to move in across Ireland. And that heralds a pretty wet night to come across some southern parts of the UK as we go into Wednesday. So wet start in the south on Wednesday. Things starting to quieten down, though, as we go through the rest of the week with more in the way of sunshine developing.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Well, joining me to go through the Sunday newspaper front pages is GB News presenter and former Defence Secretary Michael Portillo. Michael, good morning to you. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter to you, Camilla.
We have no eggs here, but we wouldn't be able to get through the news review if we were chomping on chocolate. So
And perhaps we take Easter even more seriously than eggs.
We do indeed. Indeed we do. But let's try and have an excellent newspaper review this morning, and starting with, well, a very serious story on the front of the Telegraph. It's on the front of quite a few of the newspapers. This Easter truce that isn't really a truce at all, according to President Zelensky, hitting out at Vladimir Putin and saying, well, frankly, we're still under enemy fire, so nothing has changed.
Yes, Putin auto-declared a 30-hour truce. It seems, certainly from the Ukrainian reports, that no such truce occurred. What struck me about this was, does Putin really think that Trump is so naive that he would be swayed by this, that he would be convinced or impressed by this non-30-hour truce? It's pretty worrying if this is the sort of thing that is going to reassure Trump. I mean, the latest position, as you know, is that Trump is saying that really he's about to give up on the peace talks. This seems to have prompted Putin to come in and make this this offer of a truce. I wonder also whether we're being rather naive. I mean, why is so much news coverage being given to Putin declaring this truce, which we all know is not a truce?
It's not a truce.
We all know it to be an entirely cynical move, and yet he has achieved global publicity with it, propaganda with it.
But you're asking whether Putin thinks that Trump is naive. Do you think Trump is naive? I mean, it strikes me the president seems to be running rings around the US president.
I'm afraid I do. I think China's running rings around President Trump as well. There are people who are still holding out the hope of saying this is all some marvellous master plan and you'll see the next twist in the plot. But I don't see it at all. And, you know, he's meant to be this great deal maker. He gave away everything to Putin initially, made it clear that he thought that Putin could hold on to his gains, put all the pressure on Zelensky, cut off for a few hours at least support to the Ukrainians. So, no, I don't think he's being clever at all. I think he is pretty naive. And the question now must be whether Trump can pull it back. I mean, could he reverse policy? Could he now give better and more arms to Ukraine in order to put pressure on Putin? That would be the only thing that Putin would understand.
But what do you make of this taking a pass, very American phrase, isn't it, on the peace talks? What's that meant to mean?
It's meant to mean that he breaks his election pledge, which was to get this sorted in 24 hours. Now he's saying if he doesn't see movement within his first 100 days, he's going to give up on it. It's not clear to me whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, there are those who think that although the Russians are making some advances, that they're getting pretty exhausted one way or another by the war, and that actually, if the war goes on, that may not be a bad thing from the Ukrainian point of view.
Yes.
As I put it to Sir Richard Dearlove last week on my programme, former head of MI6, I said there is a danger here that the Americans are going to snatch defeat from the jaws of stalemate.
Yes, that's a very good way of putting it. I mean, it might suit Zelensky, it might also suit a Russian president who's been in power now since when? 1999, and is in no particular hurry to settle anything.
Well, it's difficult for us to know what the pressures on him are. He's certainly losing a lot of soldiers.
Should we move on to the story of the week, really, which is reflecting on the Supreme Court judgment? We've now got the Mail on Sunday claiming that there's a WhatsApp group that's been set up with Labour ministers basically saying, look, we want to defy this ruling. We don't want to go along with... I mean, what's your interpretation of the ruling, first of all, Michael?
I'm not going to offer you an interpretation of the ruling. I mean, the ruling seems to be very important, and people are going to have to work out its implications.
Yes.
I mean, as you said a moment ago, it seemed pretty evident to most of us that a woman was a biological woman, but a lot of people have been acting as though that were not the case. I mean, one of the examples given here, by the way, is that Mumsnet, the government withdrew advertising from Mumsnet because Mumsnet was thought to be... I'm going to say that they were biological realists.
Yes.
So Mumsnet were biological realists. So the government, in 2022, when there was a Conservative government, apparently withdrew its advertising. I mean, and one of the other stories, by the way, in the Sunday Times is how many threats have been made to the women who took the case to the Supreme Court.
One of whom I'm going to be speaking to in just a moment, Susan Smith.
And you might ask her, because it also reveals on the front page that they've also had a lot of supportive measures as well. But back to the WhatsApp group, I'm not sure what to make of this. I think Labour is very torn by this issue. Sir Keir Starmer has said nothing about the judgment whatsoever. The Mail on Sunday is quoting Chris Bryant, who's the Culture Minister.
Yes.
And he's been critical of Lady Faulkner. Lady Faulkner is the chair of the Equality and Human Rights Commission. And she seems, generally to have been a biological realist to me.
Yes.
And she's come in for a certain amount of flack. She seems to be criticised now by Chris Bryant. What did she say? She said that her interpretation was that trans women would not be able to use single-sex spaces for women and would not be able to compete in women's sport, which does seem pretty straightforward. That would seem to flow from the judgment. But Chris Bryant, Culture Minister, thinks not.
Along with Angela Eagle and others, I believe. Let's move on to an interview that the Sunday Times has done with Nigel Farage. And the positioning of it is quite interesting. It's obviously in response to British Steel. It reminds us that Farage back in the day was a metals trader and so knows the industry quite well. But what interested me about it, Michael, and I don't know what you think with your former Tory hat on, the positioning of Reform as now the party of the worker. It's quite J.D. Vancian, this idea that Farage would be supporting both nationalisation and reindustrialisation. You've then got Kemi Badenoch, the opposition leader, sort of moving away from net zero, saying we're too reliant on China, Trumpian rhetoric. And then you've got Labour slightly at sixes and sevens over its we're the real party of the worker status.
Well, absolutely. Historically, one thought of the working class vote as being Labour's. But clearly, it's actually quite a volatile vote. I mean, as recently as 2019, the Red Wall went Conservative. You might think the Red Wall went back to Labour, which it did, but you also know that Labour got fewer votes in 2024 than it had received in 2019. So it was not a particularly impressive recovery. And Labour does have real difficulties with the working class vote. Ed Miliband today is saying that they're going to double down on net zero. Net zero is not particularly popular with the working class vote. The abandonment of the inquiry into the rape gangs in the north of England, that doesn't go down well with the working class voter either. So I think Labour has problems with the working class vote and is there to be grabbed. And certainly in these elections, Reform UK is going to have a good go at it. Interesting to me that Farage said the 1980s idea that it didn't matter where stuff was made anywhere in the world, that's gone. 1980s idea, actually, of course, that was a period of Thatcher government.
Well, indeed.
So he's actually attacking that Thatcherite period. Obviously, his view is that that idea, or that interpretation of globalisation, it doesn't matter where you make things. He thinks that's now unpopular. And he is asserting that there are certain things that have to be made in Britain, and that's pretty Trumpian.
Well, a week doesn't go by without discussing Trumpland. And with me to do that now is Dr. James D. Boys, US political commentator and senior research fellow at UCL. Lovely to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in on Easter Sunday.
My pleasure. Happy Easter.
I mean, we've got a situation, I was actually discussing it with Michael Portillo on the papers earlier, with Zelensky now saying that Putin's ceasefire isn't worth the paper it's written on. And we were both trying to decide whether Donald Trump is playing a blinder here in some kind of art of the deal negotiation with the Russians, or actually if he's being played. What do you think?
It's a great question. I think one of the problems is that Donald Trump is the classic Rorschach test. You see what you want to see. And unfortunately, a lot of people have already made their minds up a long time ago about what that is. There's very clearly an awful lot of public relations going on in this debate. It's as much a PR war as a land war, I think, in terms of trying to figure out where everybody is and how this moves forward. The PR battle in terms of announcing a ceasefire, is it holding, is it not, is very clearly designed in part, I think, to gain an upper hand in any negotiations which are going to be moving forward into the second quarter of this year. The Americans obviously have been engaging in talks in the UAE with Russia and with Ukraine. At this point, they seem to have reached something of an impasse. And it's interesting to see, of course, Donald Trump and Marco Rubio now talking about potentially putting those talks on hold and withdrawing from those. I think a lot of people have understandably raised eyebrows about that. But I do think it's pure Trump, quite frankly. I've spent the last 5 years researching him and his approach to politics for a book I've got hopefully coming out later in the year. And the idea here is, I think, to sort of, add unpredictability. And he's talked about this throughout his entire career. He believes America basically is failed by its diplomats, and this is an attempt to, I think, engender a sense of fear in both Russia and Ukraine about if we don't get a deal now, the fighting could continue. We've got to get to the table. Plus, of course, I think Donald Trump is motivated by, what you see with Keir Starmer and his ego trip, trying to basically put together this European coalition, sort of his Churchillian moment. And
is he after a Nobel Prize?
Well, it's possible. Again, if you live long enough, you see the same things coming through. I was thinking about, knowing I was coming on, I was thinking about this last night. You go back to the early 90s, for example, when you had the Yugoslavian war and you had the formation of the EU. And at that point, now some over 30 years ago, you had European politicians coming forward and saying, the Americans should stay out of this. This is the hour of Europe. We can sort all this out. And the Secretary of State at the time said, all right, get on with it. And we saw what happened. And you ended up with years and years of conflict because of European stubbornness and an inability to come together.
I know, but then the Americans taking a pass on peace talks.
It is astonishing. But again, I think this is all part of Donald Trump's approach to things. Far too many people, I think, misunderstand Donald Trump. He's put the idea forward about talks and he's now pulling them back. It's the classic sort of art, the deal negotiation, which people are unexpected by.
Final brief thought on the midterms. I mean, I know we're only just into the first 6 months of his presidency. We've got marches now, the length and breadth of America, about this executive order on deportations. Now with tariffs, and I think some MAGAs having a bit of buyer's remorse, the midterms could be ugly for Trump, couldn't they?
Well, there's several things in there. First of all, it's usually the case that the first midterm elections go against the sitting president. But his opinion poll ratings have gone up in many cases, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the actual polling.
The Trump dichotomy. On one hand, unpopular with the press, but perhaps not with his own populace. Indeed. Thank you very much indeed, James, for coming in this morning.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. During the week ahead, we'll see a mixed bag of weather. Most places seeing some warm sunshine, some showery rain too though, and things starting to quieten down later on in the week. Low pressure sitting towards the south and west of the UK at the moment. That's starting to feed some showers in across southern and western parts of the UK. And certainly as we head into the evening, we'll see further showers across the south and southeast of England.